Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning, Richard. It's been a fantastic week. Holidays, kids are off, but so much happening with AI. It's been an overwhelming one this week.
Yeah, and a lot happening with Maginative. We hit a big milestone this week, uh, getting a lot more attention to the site
Yep,
by Hacker News as well. So fun times for us to see the work that we're doing reaching such a big audience.
exactly. 50,000 monthly readers now. We have been at around 40,000 for a while. And so it's amazing to just see that bump up, just getting a lot of support from you guys in the community. We really appreciate it. We love the love. We love the feedback that we're getting. And it's great to see that the work that we're doing is being appreciated by the community.
Absolutely, yeah. Um, One thing to remind listeners of is we have a premium service as well, so you can subscribe to that, and that gives you a lot more depth, a lot more insight into these topics that we're going to cover on today's wrap up. So you can just subscribe on the website either to getting regular updates or to the in-depth updates. It's cheap, it's really worthwhile, it helps us, and keeps bringing the good news to you guys. So let's start. Obviously, there's been a lot to talk about, but probably the most dramatic piece of news is that Stability AI's CEO resigned. Let's talk a little bit about why that happened, why we should care about that.
Sure. So at the end of last week into the weekend, we had breaking news that Imad Mustaq, the CEO of Stability AI, had resigned. Now, Stability AI, they're responsible for stable diffusion, stable audio, a bunch of the open source AI models that are popular within the creative community. And so it came as a surprise to many that he would just up and resign from his job. He also left his position on the board, and he's apparently going to be working on decentralized AI. Now, to put this in context, you have to remember last week we said the CEO of Inflection left and went to Microsoft. And so now you have two major AI companies that basically were flagship companies for the industry and, in essence, leaving the companies to crumble. We're not sure what's going to happen with Inflection. We're not sure what's going to happen with Stability AI. However, it is significant that the CEOs have decided to leave. And it's just a reminder that with all the hype with the AI industry, at the end of the day, you are running businesses, and startups will need to ensure that with all the money that's pouring into these companies, that they're still ensuring that they have their fundamentals behind them, and that in the end that they can prove value for the customers that they're serving.
Yeah, another watershed moment for leadership. As you know, I'm a big fan of leadership. Most of my books are written on this topic. Ultimately, AI is about the people behind that, the people that lead that, the people that organize that, the people that fund that. So, yeah, we talk a lot about technology, but really what we're saying is who are the people behind these things? And a good question that everybody should ask themselves is most problems are who problems, not what problems. So, if you hear something in the news and it sounds like it's about technology, it's probably not about the technology itself. It's about who's behind the technology.
Exactly. We'll keep following the story. However, Stability did release models this week. And so the chances are that the company will keep moving forward. But obviously, this is a huge blow to them, but we still wish them the best.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen companies survive more disruption than just this. So, one of the things that is close to home for me as somebody who's been in the design world and the product design world is the Adobe Summit. I've actually attended a couple of these. Last week was the Adobe Summit, and they are right at the forefront of some really cool stuff. We've seen Firefly, obviously, to what's almost a year old now. Can you believe that? I feel like this time is just flying by. Um, but let's talk a little bit about that. What are you thinking, and what are you seeing from Adobe?
So this was a really big week for Adobe. Not the biggest week. I think they're going to have their bigger summit in the fall. But you're right. It's been a year since Adobe Firefly debuted, and it's interesting to see adoption from the company, from enterprises looking into models that they want to use. Of course, Adobe's value proposition has always been that our models are trained on licensed content or content that has been in the public domain for a while. So you're safe to use it in a commercial setting compared to your mid journeys of the world or your DALIs of the world. And so I think that has really appealed to many businesses and many enterprises. The second thing that they have done is they have sought to build their Firefly services within tools that businesses and creators are already using. So,
Right.
sure, you have the standalone Firefly website, But if you're in Photoshop, you can use Firefly services. If you're in Premiere, you can use Firefly services. And what you saw this week was that continuation of them saying, hey, we're going to bring our Firefly AI services to the tools that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a bunch of releases that I thought were really interesting and a couple of announcements. The first was a new Firefly services and custom models for enterprises. And this is big. This is what businesses have been asking for. We
Mm-hmm.
want custom models that are trained on our data, that have our context in mind, that is really personalized for our business. And that's
Mm.
what you'll be able to do with these custom models. So let's say you have a certain brand style guide, you can ensure that the model is trained with that. And so whatever content you're putting out is going to adhere to those requirements. And then with Firefly services, it means that developers can build these workflows into their tools and into their internal services or into their customer facing applications. And so, two big opportunities now for enterprises to really adopt AI. And I'm sure you're going to see Adobe really making a push for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important stuff. I think I'd like to emphasize the fact that these are services as well, in the sense that they have recognized that enterprises need to get up to speed, they need to be onboarded, they need to have processes associated with these new tools. As you know, in my day job, I'm talking to enterprise leaders, design, product, and engineering leaders on an almost daily basis. This week, we ran a workshop for those people. The question that's on their lips every single time they see a new tool is, how do we use this? It's
Mm-hmm.
not clear how this technology is going to make it into the current workflow. And so this is a smart move by Adobe to say, look, we'll help you get there. We'll help you understand how to use this technology. We'll customize our stuff for your workflow, for your outcomes. Really, really big deal. We're going to have to see a lot more of that. It's not just about platforms. It's not just about tech. It's about actually getting people to use this stuff.
Exactly. And they did release two additional tools that they previewed earlier, but you're now starting to see the rollout. And I think these could be really interesting. The first is just Platform AI Assistant for
Mm.
AEP. So their Adobe Experience platform will now have a chatbot that you can basically have conversations with. And it's in this realm of a new user experience that many companies are beginning to expect, where there's just a chatbot that you can ask questions. You don't need to have a lot of the technical understanding of the tools or the services within the underlying application. And so I think this could be really interesting for leaders that may want to visualize data or ask a question about a campaign without having to dive in or asking a subordinate to go and run a report. The
Exactly.
second announcement is a tool they're calling GenStudio. And within GenStudio, the idea is that they're going to centralize what they call the content creation life cycle. And so from creating content to managing that content, you're going to have one tool that really centralizes everything. It's still in beta, but they're bringing on users on a regular basis to try and beta test it and getting feedback. But I think ultimately, with all the different tools that you're seeing coming out of Adobe, it makes sense. As you're saying,
Mm.
companies are going to want to know, how can we use this in our workflow? And if they can say, hey, we have this one tool that allows you to plug into all of these other tools, so you can plan, you can create, you can manage, and you can activate your content, this is going to be great. It's tied into the different social media platforms. You can have all of the requirements for your custom models, and you can have it apply those restrictions to content that's created. And so let's say you have certain colors that you need to stick to, and you have a person in marketing that's creating an ad, and they choose a different color. It will not be approved for distribution until they're within the guidelines. And so this will automate a lot of that content lifecycle. And so we're really interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as a big fan of design systems, that rings my bell. And of course, yeah, like you said earlier, the key thing here is that these are installed, existing, and approved products or platforms within the enterprise already. They don't have to go out and get approval. They don't have to get SSO and security and legal to sign off on this stuff. It's all part of that existing system. So, this goes to show how powerful an installed model is when it comes to bringing new technology to an audience.
Exactly. One of the things I have said early on, the moat in AI is that user base. If you already have a user base, a lot of companies, a lot of people aren't interested in picking up a new tool and learning a new tool. But if you can bring AI to them, that'll be great. And you're seeing that even with Adobe, they're adding new features to Firefly on a regular basis. So, for
Hmm.
example, this week they also announced their structure reference. And what this is doing, it's giving creators more control over the final output from these AI models. And so let's say you have a shape, for example, my phone, and I want to create an image or a diagram that has the same structure as this phone. I can simply use this as a structure reference. And when I create my prompt, it's going to also create it with this same structure. And this combined with their style reference means that I can also give it an image reference to say, hey, use the style of this image and use the structure of this other image and create this new image with these parameters. And so little by little, you're starting to see that control come back in the hands of creators. And that's what they have also been asking for with Midjourney and other chatbots, where all you can do is to just say, hey, this is what I want, and you expect from the ether this product or this image to come out. Sometimes it's what you're looking for, sometimes it's not. And what we know about artists, what we know about creators is that ultimately they want to express themselves. And while it was fun to see what was coming out of the machine, I think this control is going to be really big for a lot of creators.
Totally. Cool. Should we move on to the new AI models for the week?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we got three pieces of news. We've got Databricks, we have Jamba, and we've got Grok. So tell us about this.
So, three different models and three important conversations to have around all of them. The first is from Databricks, and they released their DBRX model. Now, Databricks is a major company that provides data storage services. So, when you
Hmm.
think of data lakes, when you think of a lot of the big companies, enterprise companies, they need to centralize all of the data within their organization to ensure that it's actionable. Companies like Snowflake and Databricks are essential for that. And so
Hmm.
it makes sense for them to also offer AI solutions on top of that because, of course, your data is already there. So why not also leverage AI within that data without having to move it somewhere else? So Databricks decided, hey, you know what? We're going to build our own open weights model, and it's very capable. It rivals a lot of the open source models. It even rivals some of the proprietary closed models. But the question is this: they spent $10 million to build it.
Hmm.
And so, is it worth it for enterprises as you're thinking of your AI strategy? Is it worth spending tens of millions of dollars to build your own model that will likely be outdated very quickly? It's an
Hmm.
important question for companies to ask. Or is it better for you to use one of the open weights models from these larger enterprises, maybe fine tune it, maybe use RAG? At this point, I don't see the numbers working out. And so, yes, it's a capable model, but it is similar to many of the other models that are already on the market. Did they really need to release their own model? Of course, it's built with
Yeah.
their technology on their platform. So it's going to be easier for companies to use it. But I mean, if you're a developer and you can also use Llama, you can also use Mistral, you can also use some of these other models, was it worth it for them to do that?
Yeah, I think the it might go back to our earlier conversation about services. If they are able to help their engineering communities use this in a way that's really valuable to enhance and expand their use of Databricks, I think it would work out. I think, in this case, it's a little bit like open source, like Drupal and other models, where you give essentially the platform away for free, and then you get the customer to spend a lot of more money on your existing service or on new services or existing services to expand that within their footprint. So again, we'll see. I also have a question mark around, is it worth it? But I also think it's a necessary evil, right? You have to kind of try these things and you have to find out just how useful this stuff is going to be. Because if you don't try, you're going to end up having to rely on somebody else. And I think a lot of these companies are worried about having, the big seven take control of the AI space.
Yeah, and rightfully so. And of course, the reminder is once you have customers that are starting to use these models, you'll need to keep building more advanced models as the technology
Hmm.
progresses. And so we'll see just how much runway Databricks is giving themselves to keep investing in custom models like this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Jamba.
Yeah, Jamba is exciting. So When we talk about models, the majority of times we're talking about models with the traditional transformer architecture. Some of them are a mixture of experts like Mistral and some of the newer Gemini models. But overall, foundationally, they're built on the transformer architecture. Now, what Jamba represents from AI 21 is a new model that supports a new hybrid architecture. So it's a little bit of transformer architecture, but the new Mamba SSM, and SSM is structured state space models. And what it's all about is efficiency. So it has a 256,000 context window, which is massive. When you think of most of the models like Llama, maybe you're at around 40,000. 256,000 tokens is huge. But what's impressive is that they're able to fit up to 140,000 tokens on a single GPU. That
Mm.
is amazing. So when you're talking about cost savings, when you're talking about the future AI models that need to be massive, if we can have better architecture where we can squeeze more tokens into smaller spaces, and if we can have larger context, that is going to be amazing. It's also a mixture of experts models. And so you're talking about a hybrid model that is taking the best of all of the different worlds, the best of transformers,
Hmm.
mixture of experts, and now with the Mamba model. So we're excited about it. It is able to compete and surpass both proprietary and closed models. And so I think a lot of people will be looking at this architecture to see if it's worth it. There's an entire article and a paper that is worth reading to dive deeper into this if you're excited and if you're interested. But the big takeaway here is that there's innovation happening even on the architecture front to optimize models and to ensure that we can squeeze as much efficiency as we can out of these AI systems.
Yeah, and just remind anybody that's listening, any of these stories that we're mentioning, we have an article on the Maginative.com website for you to go and dive into. So if we reference something and you're thinking, gee, how do I get more of that? Or how do I read about that? Just go straight to Maginative.com and you'll find the article. Okay, last model is Grok. Mr. Musk is, is busy.
Yeah, it's really impressive when you think of how quickly Grok has grown. What Musk is doing with Twitter and X.AI is not something to be underestimated. They have now released Grok 1.5. And so last week we spoke about the fact that they released the weights of Grok 1. And so they're basically saying, hey, you know what? We're living up to what we're asking OpenAI to do. We're releasing the weights of our models. And this week they're announcing that Grok 1.5 is coming. In terms of how it compares, it's probably at the level of Mistral Large. It does surpass like Grok 1 considerably, but it's now competing closer to like a Claude 2, Claude 3, but it still has a lot of ways to go. So you're talking about a model that is more capable, but the big advantage that Grok potentially could have is that it has ties directly into the Twitter ecosystem. And so you're able to get that real time data feed of what people are thinking in terms of sentiment or what content is going out on Twitter. And so I think that could be a differentiator ultimately. Of course, Elon spoke about creating a maximum truth seeking AI. And so we're still yet to see how that plays out in the real world. But they are making progress. This model is 128,000 tokens, so a much larger context window. He also announced that all Twitter premium users will now have free access to Grok, so you don't need to get the additional level above premium to get access to it. So we'll see. It's another player in the market. We'll see how it compares ultimately if people end up using it. There are a lot of models that end up getting a lot of press, a lot of hype, but ultimately when it comes to day-to-day usage, people just aren't using it. And I think they will need to justify that use case. The good thing is that they do have robotics under Tesla that will leverage large language models also. They do have self-driving cars under Tesla that will need to leverage large language models. So there are other applications of their AI beyond just a chatbot. Think of the chatbot basically as a customer facing, consumer facing experience that they can offer as they make it more capable for these other applications.
Cool. Let's shift our attention to the new products that have been coming out, also updates to existing products. ARIA just released Brainbox. Microsoft's got to see some new enhancements this week, as they have every week. Rabbit, which we are eagerly awaiting to see more about. And then a question about Apple. They're starting to look at partnerships overseas, which would make sense considering that Huawei is basically eating their lunch over there.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting to see how they're going to come back in the Chinese market. So why don't we start with Apple and we'll work backwards to Brainbox.
It's interesting. We've spoken about Apple. We've spoken about them not being very present in this AI moment that we're having. Many people suggested that Apple always works behind the scenes, they take their time. What we're seeing here is a continuation of our story. We spoke about the fact that they were having conversations with OpenAI, with Google to leverage their cloud AI models and use their own proprietary models on device. And of course, in China, there are strict requirements in terms of who can make models available to the public. And so
Hmm.
we didn't expect Apple to really be trying to meet those requirements. It makes sense for them to leverage one of the companies that have already been approved. And so here we're seeing just another partnership, but this time overseas with Baidu. Baidu has a really good model called Ernie that has been very popular within the Chinese market. And one, it's affirmation that Baidu is doing something right because they chose Baidu over many of the other companies. And so
Hmm.
that's going to just provide a bit of lift for Baidu. But we'll also see partnerships stateside and in the Western countries for these services. And as of now, it seems like that's going to be Google. And the important thing to remember is that for a company like Apple that has such a massive user base, it's not just, hey, can I create the model? But do you have the infrastructure to support this
Hmm.
large customer base that Apple needs at the level that they need to operate at? And you'll only have a few companies that have the resources to do that. And so hopefully that's what you're going to see with Google and Baidu.
Got it. Okay, cool. Let's talk about rabbits. I'm really curious about what's happening there.
So there's this interesting dynamic that's happening now. You have Humane with their AI pin that we covered last week.
Hmm.
This week, we're talking about Rabbit. Both devices will be shipping in the coming weeks, in the coming months. And we spoke about the price point. Humane is like almost $700 plus a monthly subscription fee. Rabbit is under $200, no subscription fee. And what Rabbit did this week, they released some updates in terms of shipping, in terms of what you can expect from the user experience. We have seen this device in action, and the delay, the latency on the responses was massive at the time. Of course, that wasn't the finished product. We're going to be looking forward to seeing what they end up with. But this week, 11 Labs announced that they're partnering with Rabbit to produce to provide the voice, and so 11 Labs is known for their hyper realistic sounding voices, and it's going to be great to just see that and hear that from the device. We also are learning more about their large action model, and that allows you to basically use the different sensors on the device to provide additional data to the models so that it can be more helpful. And so they're excited to ship. A lot of people are excited to get their hands on it. And I think you're going to see an interesting dynamic when it comes to AI first devices. Are we going to go down the road of the Humane AI pin, or are people going to gravitate more towards the Rabbit R1? Ultimately, for me, I think the fact that these companies have an operating system that is so unique to manage AI queries, that is the major value offering. And the fact that Rabbit is that much cheaper, I think, gives them an advantage. So we'll see. Ultimately, it's super early days for AI first devices, but it's great to start to see these devices come into market.
Yeah, I think what's probably going to happen is it's more going to be about a brand experience where, just like Apple and Android, Apple essentially, when you carry around an Apple product, says, I'm cool, I'm sexy, I'm interesting, I've got money to spend. Um, Whereas Android probably says, look, I'm practical, I think about saving money, I'm not like particularly worried about my image. And those are huge, gross, generalizations, but I think that's how the branding has been positioned. And I think there's probably going to be in the AI space a similar kind of differentiation between products saying, hey, look, look at me, I'm wearing my X and I'm wearing my Y, and this
Mhm.
is how you can differentiate. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. Remember those ads? A
Yeah.
similar kind of story, yeah. So, which leads us into Microsoft. So they were the original PC, full guy for the for the Apple ads. Tell us about what Copilot's doing right now.
All Microsoft is saying is, look at me now.
Yeah.
So Microsoft is again iterating through Copilot, and what you're seeing is that they're taking OpenAI's technology and they're applying it into use cases that they have proven over the course of their organization's history. They're really good at enterprise software, and they're building these AI solutions into the products that people are using. And so Microsoft Teams is getting a major upgrade with these enhancements.
Hmm.
We've seen the meeting summaries. What you're going to see is just tweaking the user experience so it's just easier to get meeting chat and call transcripts, the AI unearthing insights from those call transcripts.
Hmm.
They're working on phone call VoIP integrations that will help with basically their virtual switchboards. And for hybrid meetings, this is something that they have been really honing in on. They have this IntelliFrame technology where if you have multiple people, let's say in a meeting room, it will take individual video streams of each individual. And so if you have a hybrid meeting where some people are remote, some people are in a meeting room, it will still be able to provide this seamless experience where you're basically able to focus on everyone for the people that are remote, and for of course the people that are in the room, they're able
Hmm.
to see this widescreen view of everybody else that's in the meeting. It's a really interesting application of AI, but these are the details that you're starting to see roll out with the Microsoft solutions. And of course, they can do it. They have massive teams within the organizations that can focus on just one use case. And this is just a great example of how they're taking OpenAI's GPT technology and customizing it so much that it doesn't even feel like ChatGPT anymore. It doesn't feel like the GPT-4 that many people are used to. This is its own tool and solution that enterprises will adopt.
Yeah. I'm really curious about this. I've noticed that almost every single tool that I'm using, either in the Microsoft or Google universe, we're talking about, workspaces here, they are turning on these tools actively. They're actually encouraging you, notifying you in product notifications saying, turn these on, turn these tools on. Um, the downstream effect of this, of course, is, are we going to need products like Gong and Zoom and things like this if these installed, well established, ubiquitous products like Google and Microsoft have already got within a workplace? How is it going to affect the peripherals and these other companies? While at the same time, we're definitely in a squeeze market where companies are looking to consolidate. They're looking to use fewer tools, not more. There's stack consolidation.
Mm-hmm.
Spoken about this before. I am not an investor, so I'm not going to make any predictions here on specific stocks or products, but I am going to say that I'm thinking that's what I'm both in my day job, where I'm out there talking to SaaS companies, and also just as a journalist here, looking at what's happening in the market. I'm seeing a lot of companies consolidate their stack, and I think that we're going to find there are being a lot of dead bodies along the side of the road. Can't say
I
exactly what's going to happen, but this is what I'm noticing.
I agree, Richard. So one of the stories that we didn't even have on our list to cover in today's podcast that I want to just kind of hint at. Microsoft this week also, along with Intel, gave more details about their AI PC and
Hmm.
what you're going to see in the next couple of months. PCs will have a dedicated Copilot button on them. They're going to be built to run local models. And so, yes, when you talk about just having these services completely integrated, you're definitely seeing that. We're seeing companies like Slack that had so much momentum lose so much steam and energy to Microsoft Teams just because of the installed base. And
Yeah.
so, now to your point, what happens when they start rolling out these services that will completely replace what entire SaaS offerings were before?
Yeah. I think I mentioned this to you about a month ago. I was running a workshop, and a Microsoft leader was actually at the event, and he was wearing a Clippy pin on his
Yeah, I
lapel,
remember.
and he said, "We're bringing Clippy back." So, God help us. Okay, so the last story on this particular list of new products is the BrainBox AI from ARIA.
Sure. So Brainbox is ARIA is a tool from Brainbox, and it's a different industry. I'm always fascinated with solutions that you don't think of when you think of AI. And this is into building management, reducing carbon emissions. And ARIA is their artificial responsive intelligent assistant. And they have a bunch of demos that they have provided as to how you can interact with the assistant. Is a virtual assistant that knows all the details about your building, and if
Hmm.
you have multiple buildings that you're managing. And to provide some context, the background of Brainbox is in intelligent HVAC systems. And so I think as we talk about climate tech and how we can leverage AI, solutions like this that can holistically manage an entire building. I had this thought when I was looking at this story. that the building itself may ultimately one day be this AI system that you can talk to,
Mhm.
that you can ask questions about, that you can ensure it's optimized to reduce energy consumption, to give back to the grid. I think tools like this, you're starting to see AI applied in ways that many people wouldn't have thought of. But of course, if it's your domain, if it's your industry, when you see an AI solution, you're thinking of how can I take this and apply it to what I'm passionate about or to what I'm doing. And I think the climate tech industry stands to benefit greatly from the AI solutions here.
Yeah, especially as we work in a world that needs to be very conscious of its energy consumption. I
Exactly.
think that the most fun part of this last week was the news around AI audio and video.
Wow. Yeah.
We had a lot of conversations about this in the past, but seeing what is happening both from a creative point of view, but also from just a usage point of view. One of the things that I'd like to start this conversation with is, as we understand how these voice, we just spoke a little bit about voice text to voice and using voice AI as a way to drive conversation, drive interaction, but it's also a security risk. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think we should start there and then work our way back to the creative work.
Okay. You're 100% spot on it. When you see this technology in action, you can't help but be excited, but also cautious and maybe even worried as to how society needs to prepare for this technology, and how people need to be educated about the use cases and the dangers of this technology, how regulation needs to be in place to ensure that we're responsibly developing this technology. So there are two stories this week that I think were just fascinating. The first is from a company called Hume AI. They raised a 50 million Series B round, which was great, but they also released a new product, an empathetic voice interface.
Hmm.
And what they're doing basically is they're looking to codify emotional intelligence. And first of all, when I saw that, I was like, wait, do they think you can really break down emotions to code and
Hmm.
interpret it and replicate it? And
Hmm.
I'll tell you, the demo that they provide, you can go on their website and you can speak to the chatbot. And as you're speaking, it can detect from your tone, from the words that you're using, from the pace that you're speaking, different emotions. And as you're speaking, you're seeing these emotion meters kind of just move, and it will respond accordingly based on the emotions that it's detecting. And of course, tools like Hume AI with this new API that they're offering, they don't need to be a standalone product in and of themselves. But as
Hmm.
you think of maybe robotics and robot providers taking this and building it into their models, but also as you think of your call centers taking it
Right.
and ensuring that they can use it to de-escalate situations. It's really interesting when you start thinking of AI models that can detect things about you and your current emotional and mental state that you can't even tell about yourself.
Amazing.
And I think it's a fascinating piece of technology. But of course, so many alarm bells go off when you start to see technology like this, and whose hands it will be in. They're providing it as an API, so anybody can start to take this and build it into their products and solutions. So of course, great product, great company, but a lot of questions need to be asked here.
Yeah, I mean, I do see on the positive side of this, I can understand how therapeutically, as you said, self-awareness. One of the things that we grew up with as young kids, kind of into this era, is emotional regulation has become part of every child, every elementary school experience is about the emotional intelligence, understanding that. I see these tools being very helpful, especially in a distributed type environment in a workplace that we have right now. I think these tools are going to be actually quite helpful. That's my positive side. But there is one thing, and I think OpenAI makes it very clear as they start to lean into this, is that there are organizations like Charles Schwab, who I happen to bank with. They have a voice password or voice activated password, which I've never signed up for because I've always been a little sus about that. Uh, they are actually, OpenAI is actually telling these companies, watch out, this stuff is coming. You really can't use this as a voice activated password or an entry or authorization tool anymore.
Yes, 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 and yes. I remember last year there was this talk about just kind of the state of AI. And the analogy that they use, they said, it's as if all the locks that we have built, there's now a key that can open all of them. And
It's
society
like a
just
sci-fi movie.
right? And society just isn't prepared to handle that. And so we have this very steep learning curve that we need to go about doing. And I think that's why I'm passionate about what we're doing at Maginative, because for me, AI literacy is where it starts. People need to be aware, one, that this technology exists. I've seen so much content being spread on like WhatsApp and social media where people don't know that it's synthetic content. They're seeing it and they're thinking that this is real. And I have to be like, that's AI generated, right? And of course, we're in the space, we're covering it, and it seems so obvious to us. But for people that are seeing this for the first time, they may not know.
Yeah, and let's be fair. I think I recently did a test where you have to select from a group of images and videos what you think is real and what you think is synthetic. I failed
Hmm.
horribly. And it goes to show that even if you are literate and you're aware, the default position should be you don't actually know what's going on, and there should be a second and third level of authorization or authentication that needs to be in place. So, speaking as somebody who's been in the space for a little bit, understanding what's out there, even I can be fooled. So,
Yeah.
be aware.
Exactly. In fact, what you saw OpenAI do this week, they previewed their voice engine. And with voice engine, with 15 seconds of reference audio, you can clone a speaker's voice and replicate it, translate it, and add emotions and other things to it. In fact, you're already seeing this technology at play. OpenAI says that they have partners that have been using it. HeyGen's technology, all those
Which we've
cool.
used.
Yep. And so you're seeing it, the voice technology that you're seeing with ChatGPT. Now you can talk to it and it can respond with a voice. That's voice engine at work. But they're using it with, for example, the Age of Learning, which is an education company. And they're exploring these different ways in which voice AI and synthetic voice can be helpful for people that are learning, for translating content, for communities that historically haven't been able to participate in the larger ecosystem because they have maybe a very small language population. You're seeing it for people that may have lost their voices or that have speaking disabilities that are able to know have a voice. So of course, there are lots of use cases that you're seeing with AI voice technology that will be beneficial. But as you're saying, even OpenAI is establishing the fact that this technology is going to open up a Pandora's box when it comes to what we can do with it and what bad actors ultimately will do. And I think that is something that we have to ultimately face up to. This technology will get into the hands of bad actors, and we
Mhm.
have to be prepared as a society as to how we deal with these issues when they arise.
Yep, just like in anything, learning how to use a weapon, learning how to drive a car, learning how to be sensitive to, the products that you put in your body, like alcohol or cigarettes and things like
Hmm.
this. This is no different. We need to understand it. We need to regulate it. We need to educate it. We need to be prepared for that future. So, again, this is something we talk about a lot. We are not in the business of prediction. We are in the business of preparation, and we will continue to prepare our audience members for what's coming. So let's shift a little bit to the creative side of stuff. As somebody who's actually been involved in the making of documentaries, very excited to see Sora move very quickly into that space. So what is happening? I did see a couple of videos that we posted on the site that kind of blew my mind, wondering just how close we are to AI taking over the whole of Hollywood, or that we still got some time to go.
Well, we know that OpenAI is courting filmmakers. They're over in Hollywood getting filmmakers to at least look at the technology to see what they can do with it. What they shared this week were examples of some of their early partners, some artists, some filmmakers that have been able to play with the technology. And you're seeing just different examples of what can be done with it. Of course, the technology is still very nascent. They are going to, for example, be bringing audio to their videos. Right now it's just silent videos and then you have to overlay audio on top of it.
Mhm.
We just saw that they have their voice engine, and so there is a future where you'll be able to generate a video and have it speak a script that you give to it and potentially make an entire feature length film with just synthetic
I'm,
data.
I'm, I'm so excited because my dad just wrote a book. My sister's an author. My mom's illustrating a children's book. The idea that we could take their words and immortalize them into video or documentary type experiences. I mean, I get that there's a Hollywood version of this, but just for us individually to capture the lives of the people that are amongst us, the family members whose stories will ultimately be lost just because of the passing of time, to be able to capture that and turn it into something real so that my children and the next generation can absorb that in a way that's so much more rich and visual. I mean, I'm kind of bursting with excitement here.
I mean, just listening to you talk, I'm like, wow, this is the future that we're just accelerating rapidly towards. Because of course, OpenAI isn't the only one in this space. You're seeing this technology from Stability AI, you're seeing it from Runway, and without a doubt, this is only going to get better. The worst AI videos that you have will be the ones that you have today. And so
Yeah,
I'm super excited to see where this goes.
we've got quite a lot more to cover. So why don't we shift to Google's Video Prism?
There's another story that we wrote an exclusive on it that I think is important to just bring up here. Two companies, HeyGen and Argil AI, previewed their upcoming features that bring motion to their AI avatars. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for reference, these companies are like Synthesia, DID, HeyGen, and now Argil. They allow you to have this AI avatar that you simply give text to, and it can create an entire video on its own. So if you think of sales or marketing or content creation, user generated content, or even education, you'll be able to just provide this text and generate videos. But what's great is when you combine that with the voice technologies like Voice Engine or 11 Labs, you can now dub them into different language and use lip sync so it feels like you're authentically speaking it. And as we've said in the past, we've used this with companies in countries like South Korea where they have just been floored seeing us speak Korean, and they're like, wow. And then when we explain to them that that's AI, it's just mind boggling to think that that's where we are. Now with these new avatars, you're getting motion. And so you can have a video where somebody's walking, they're moving their hands, you're seeing different expressions on their face as they talk, you're getting change in tone and inflection. This is going to be a game changer for a lot of companies. I think content creation is going to ultimately be heavily influenced by what I call AI characters and AI avatars that will be able to create hyper
Mm-hmm.
personalized content. So think of your mailing list, think of your sales funnels, and think of creating a customized
Mm-hmm.
video that's personalized for every single individual.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. Video Prism?
So what's interesting is when you think of video as a modality, the reason why we're so excited about it is because so much of how we learn is through what we see. And for AI, that's going to be from video initially. And then ultimately, once it's built into robots, they'll have just basically streaming cameras. As they're seeing the world, they'll be able to make sense of it. And this is research from Google that basically is able to have an AI look at a video and understand what's in the video. It's amazing. So basically, you see this video where, let's say, somebody's playing in the snow, and it will ask the AI what's happening, and the AI is able to say, this is what's happening in the video. And it sounds very basic and simple to us because it's natural. But the fact that we can now have AI that's getting better at seeing, but also understanding context and then being
Mm-hmm.
able to reason on top of that, that is pretty exciting. And so
Yeah.
you're starting to see these different layers of development within AI audio, within AI video, that will ultimately compound and coalesce to accelerate new technologies, but also products like robots and self-driving cars, and even the personal devices that you're using. So let's say your computer. Imagine a day when your computer actually understands what's on screen. And so it can help you as you're creating content, as you're consuming content, to optimize or to personalize it for your needs.
My grandmother had failing eyesight, the ability to be able to send her videos, and then those videos being interpreted by AI and saying, "Hey, this is what's actually going on." Maybe voice or some kind of explanation. I think that's kind of cool. But given where we are going with this story, should we talk a little bit about DeepMind's new research? They're actually suggesting that LLMs are just as good, if not better, than humans at understanding what's going on.
Yep. Apparently better at fact checking. And this is
Yeah.
pretty interesting. So basically, what they have said is, well, if you, let's say you have an assistant that you needed to go and fact check information, what they're seeing with AI, they have this new technology called LongFact. If you equip an AI with a search engine, let's say Google search, it can go out and do a much better job than the average human in terms of fact checking any information that it comes across. And so basically what happens is that it takes the information, it breaks it down into different pieces, and then it goes out, uses a search engine and fact checks each, gives it a ranking, and then overall in the end is able to determine how accurate, how factual something is. And
I
so
really want to see this as we head into this election year, a kind of like a ticker across the bottom of the television screen in real time to
as
check
yeah
in the
as somebody speaking, right? That
yeah,
would be
yeah.
fascinating. But ultimately they were able to find that their safe technology was right around 76% of the time. Human annotators were right roughly 72% of the time. And
Mm,
again, this technology will only get better. And so
yeah.
we're at this inflection point where we're starting to see this progress towards AGI. But as of now, we can start to get these hints that, hey, AI may be better at us than this one little thing in this very contained environment, but it's still a big
Right.
deal.
Cool. So I want to jump straight to the story. Stargate. Now, the last time I heard that word was when the movie came out. Makes me worry a little bit. But tell us a little bit about what Microsoft and OpenAI are planning with this huge Stargate project.
Sure. So this goes towards AI infrastructure and chips. You've heard us talking a lot about it over the last couple months, and it's only going to increase. Apparently, the information is reporting that both Microsoft and OpenAI are working on this $115 billion data center that is going to house an AI supercomputer called Stargate. And
Hmm.
this is massive. To put this in context, Microsoft's budget for like data centers and infrastructure is roughly $25 billion per year. They're going to be doing $100 billion project because they're the ones that will foot this bill.
Yeah.
And this will give OpenAI the compute power that it needs to build towards AGI. And they don't expect this to come online until 2028. There's a smaller supercomputer that they're going to be working on even before that. But this is a part of a 5-phase project that both companies are working towards. And this kind of shows you the scale at which we're talking when we talk about AGI, when we talk about the AI ecosystem. That's why you can see companies raise so much money and
Hmm.
ultimately amount to nothing at the end of the day because it's going to be so expensive. And so you're going to start to see companies pull away from the rest of the pack simply because they have the compute power. And that's why companies like NVIDIA have so much influence today because they control the chips. And what Microsoft and OpenAI are ultimately hoping to do is to build out an ecosystem where they can have more control. They're trying to build their own chips. They're also trying to use, for example, traditional Ethernet cables compared to the ones provided by NVIDIA. That way, they're not as reliant on them. You're seeing where the US is investing in their own fab companies. And so expect this story to grow even more. But the fact that just one company is looking to invest $100 billion into just one data center.
It's
It speaks to
mind-boggling.
just like the scale at which we're going to be talking when you start to bring in AWS, when you start to bring in Google and other players into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the most important thing to think about here is the energy consumption that's going to be required. Utilities are really interested in what's happening, and then of course we've got companies like my friend Nate Walkinshaw's company Taurus, which is looking at battery solutions for these huge, big installations. How do you actually make and store the energy that's required to run these things? One speculative idea that I have is that companies like Microsoft will not just invest in the data centers and the fab uh, or the facilities, but they will also invest in power generation themselves. So you can start to see that kind of investment coming from these organizations because they're going to want to own the whole vertical infrastructure and not rely on, say, an N Star or a National Grid or something like that. I think
Exactly. Can you imagine relying on Instar for your
no,
AI?
can't even rely on them for my residential needs.
And we're talking about like they're saying 5 gigawatts of power.
Yeah,
That is just bonkers. And so they're talking about just exploring everything. Everything is on the table as of now. Nuclear is on the table. They're looking, of course, for innovation. So we'll ultimately see where this leads.
yeah, absolutely. A good place to end, as always, is where is the money?
Yeah.
If we follow the money, we can start to see, just as we started to discuss, that more money has entered into the AI space this week again. Let's talk about Amazon. Let's talk about HeyGen, and then let's finish off with VizCom.
Sure. So I'm going to start with NVIDIA because we had some research that came out this week. ML Commons released their ML Perf benchmarks, and this basically just measures GPU performance. And so people are asking, well, why is NVIDIA worth so much? Why are companies spending so much on NVIDIA chips? Just look at the benchmarks that we have shared. There's no other company that is producing chips that are even close to delivering what NVIDIA is delivering. And so that's why they have the influence they have. That's why their stock has gone up so much and why they're now a $2 trillion company in such a short time. A couple of the stories that I want to just call out very quickly. Amazon completed a $4 billion investment in Anthropic. Now, this isn't a new investment. They announced last fall that they were going to be investing in Anthropic, and they reserved the right to invest up to $4 billion. So I think they invested an additional $2.75 billion. And so again, this is the scale at which these companies are playing. And to think how much money Anthropic has raised over the last year is just mind blowing. And so expect a lot more collaboration between those companies. Of course, all the big players are looking for a very solid research lab. You saw Microsoft get OpenAI, Google got DeepMind, and now Amazon, it seems, is trying to get a hold of Anthropic. They do have a minority stake in the company. No, I'm not sure how much that amounts to. So that's the first story. The second story that we should highlight is from HeyGen. Basically, this is a company that has taken the creative world by storm with their realistic AI avatars or the ability for you to translate and dub your videos with great lip sync. And there is $60 million at a $440 million valuation. And what is unique about HeyGen is in a world where AI companies are struggling to show product market fit and to actually make money, you're seeing where they went from like in 2022 $1 million in revenue, 2023 $3 million in July, and now over $20 million in annualized revenue in that space of time. And that is amazing because unlike many companies that are just burning, like when you look at Stability AI, they were burning $8 million per month. And now you have a company, a startup that's generating this. Hey, if I'm an investor, I'm definitely going in. So you're seeing where they're raising some good funds. Of course,
Amazing.
they do have some ties to China, and I think that is giving some investors pause. They have been trying to move away from that, and so we'll see ultimately where this ends up. And then the last company that we want to just call out is VizCom. VizCom for me is one of those companies that made a brave, bold step of not saying, hey, I'm going to just build another chatbot to try and have designers use to create content. We're going to rethink what an AI powered design experience should be from the ground up. And
Mm-hmm.
so they have their workbench, which has an infinite canvas. You can sketch on it. You can put in your reference images, and you can work with multiple nodes and collaboration. This is an amazing product. So it's great to see them raise $20 million Series A. I'm looking forward to seeing how they can ultimately provide better services for enterprise solutions. We have shown them to clients that absolutely love it, and they also have picked up a lot of enterprise clients that love the work that they're doing. So some great startups, some good funding, and some good stories for money in AI this week.
Yeah, I love that idea of having the this kind of this studio space, this virtual studio space that VizCom has. I imagine that we'll start to see similar kinds of things in some of the other design tools in the Adobe products, in Figma and things like that, where you can literally just sketch your ideas and prompt those things into existence. Yeah, as a huge fan of that kind of stuff, I'm really interested to see how it goes. Chris, another crazy week. Lovely catching up with you. Again, for people who are listening, you can subscribe to these updates. You get them dropped right into your inbox. We probably post about anything from 5 to 7 stories a day on the website on Maginative.com. So look out for us there. And of course, we have a premium product as well, which allows you to get a lot more in depth and some interviews as well.
Awesome. Richard, as always, great chatting with you. Thank you everyone for listening in. Until next time, one love.
Bye-bye.